Hello and welcome. It's Tuesday at 2 o'clock. This is Transformation Tuesday. If this is your first time catching me live, then please introduce yourself in the comments. I would love to meet you. I am Stephanie Doyer. If this is not your first time catching me live, then say, hey girl, hey, let me know that you are here. And if you're catching this on the replay, then just let me know by saying replay in the comments. So, Transformation Tuesday, what is that all about? So, we are talking about those moments of your life where, in that single moment, you know that something inside of you is different. It has shifted. And even though you don't know to what extent that's going to play out in your life, that you can, in hindsight, you know that in that moment, you have been transformed on the inside. That's what we're talking about here on Transformation Tuesdays. We have talked about dreams. We have talked about prayers. We have talked about moments in the middle of the night. We have talked about remembering your transformational moments from the past and holding on to them and recapturing them and making them yours now to relive it and to hold that feeling longer. We've talked about wisdom. We've talked about freedom. And today we're going to be talking about the emotional changes in a moment. So before we get started, just want to say hi. Okay, so before we get started, if there's anything that resonates with you, you can drop me a white heart, one of the glitter emojis, or the fire flame. Those are the things that I love, that I resonate with, that whenever something really resonates, there's a fly who's going to be joining us today for Transformational Tuesday. He wants to be transformed too. So, but anyways, those three emojis are my favorite. The white heart just makes me feel all warm and fuzzy on the inside. The glitter is just like this, sparkling thing, and I love things that sparkle. So, and then the flame. It just makes me think of like something's really resonating with you and really like lighting you up. So drop any one of those anytime anything just really resonates with you. So here we go. Let's talk about the emotional changes in a moment. And I want to start off with a story. So there was a moment in time. It was a while back. The first time that this ever happened was I remember I'd asked a friend of mine to do something for me, right? That person was going to be in the exact place at the exact time where my mother was, and my mother wanted to send me something, and that person was coming to where I was. And so I called my friend and said, hey, can you pick this up from my mom and just bring it to me since you're coming this way? Nobody was going to be inconvenienced, right? Everybody was going to be at the same place at the same time sooner or later. And they said, sure. But didn't do it. Did not get the thing from my mom. Did not bring it to me, which wouldn't have been a big deal if they had just said no up front. My mom just could have sent it to me, no problem. But it was the fact of the matter that I had asked the friend to do something for me. The friend said yes. I expected the friend to follow through. The friend did not. Therefore, I got very upset. But what I hadn't realized in that moment was all of the times before that I had been upset by this friend saying that something would happen and then no follow through, because I had just either ignored it or pushed it down, set it aside, didn't give any meaning to it whatsoever. And so at this point, it all came up. Like all of those push down emotions, all of the push down frustration, all of the pushing down of feeling like I was being ignored or not important enough or not valued enough. All of that stuff kind of came out in the one moment of this thing not happening. And I can't even really tell you why I decided in that moment to go with that feeling of being mad, but I did. I was all alone in my apartment, and it was that final moment of feeling betrayed, of feeling that I had been rejected, and kind of also realizing that was the pattern, and realizing it and accepting it for what it was. That word is an important word, accepting it for what it was. Keep that in mind. And it all just kind of come to fruition and hit me, and it was really more compounded in that moment than it was in any other moment before. probably because I was in denial before. But in that moment, it was very, very clear to me that I had been betrayed, I had been rejected, and I was not as important to this person as I thought I was, and that that person was to me, and what I was willing to do for that person. And I just went with it in the moment. I was no longer going to push the feeling down. I was no longer going to ignore the feeling. I was no longer going to ignore the pattern or the situation or the relationship that I thought I had, but I really didn't have. And so in that moment, I decided to be, this is key, I decided to be real and honest with myself about what was going on and how I felt about it. I was no longer willing to be okay with it. Hello fly. I was no longer willing to just let it go. And so in that moment, I let myself feel the feelings that came up. And since there was nobody around, I was in my apartment, like I said, all by myself, I said everything that came to my mind about the other person, whether it was true or not. I just let it come out. I said everything that came to my mind about what I thought about that person, what I thought had been happening over the course of our friendship, and I was done with it. And here's where the transformation came in, literally in a moment. I went from being beyond mad, right? You could say pissed off would be a really good definition of how I felt in that moment. And letting myself feel the feelings of betrayal, right? I was no longer pushing it down or denying it, but I was letting myself feel that feeling, all of the emotions that had been building up over the course of several months, probably almost a year, that I couldn't even really see. But in hindsight, right? Hindsight's so wonderful because we can really see things in clarity as they are and not just how we wish they were or wanted them to be in the moment. But everything came crystal clear, and I let myself feel the feelings of betrayal, of anger, of rejection, and of sadness, and the pain of realizing where I was and where I wasn't in the mind of the other person. And I let myself feel all of it in whatever range it came out in, whichever way, because sometimes you can go from being mad to being frustrated to being sad to being hurt to being mad all over again, right? And if you're a girl or a woman, like, you know, that can happen in a matter of seconds, right? That cycle of emotion going from one to the next. And I just let myself feel it, and I was honest about it. And here's what I didn't do. I didn't have myself feel any shame or any guilt or any condemnation for feeling the feelings, regardless of whether they were valid or not. Now, did the other person not follow through on their word? Yes. Was my frustration and anger justified? Yeah. Did I take it to that person and like give it to him and like let that person know what I was thinking and just totally unleash on that person? No. But did I give myself the time and the space and the permission to feel it? And here's the big thing, to own it. I gave myself the permission to own my feeling without having any of the shame or the condemnation or the guilt associated with it. I wasn't judging myself or saying, I'm mad at this person, but I shouldn't be because really, I asked them to, and maybe they didn't want to, and so maybe they just felt obligated and said yes, and maybe, no, there was none of that. There was none of this justifying of the emotion. I just let myself feel it. And I sat there with it, and I said every honest and raw and transparent thing that came to my mind. Whenever I am processing something in my mind, I like to talk. You can ask my husband. He'll come into the room and he'll say, "Who are you talking to?" And I'm like, myself? Just because there isn't anybody here doesn't mean that I can't talk to myself and really process and work through some things. So this has always been how I process, and even to this day. Now, this incident happened well before I even moved to Texas for the first time. So we're talking like over 20 years ago. But this was like the first moment that I really realized what was happening, and I was aware of what I was doing with myself and the thoughts that I was thinking, and letting myself process through it, right? So I was talking out loud, saying anything that came to my mind about that other person that I wish maybe I could say, but in hindsight knew that I would regret it. I just got it all out of my system. I got it all out. And not just that day and not just that moment, but all of the moments that had been leading up to that. And here's what I learned. That I can be real and I can be transparent and I can be honest. The ugly truth, the raw, unfiltered truth. There were some F-bombs that were dropped in that little conversation I had with myself. There was some force of words and some feeling of emotion. There were some unholy tones, right? There were some unholy words that came out of my mouth, getting all of this out, okay? Here's the thing, nobody else heard it. I don't know, maybe the person who lived in the apartment next to me heard it. I don't know, they're probably like, that girl is mad. I'm not gonna go ask her for a cup of sugar right now. I'm on my way. But I'm just joking. But nobody else heard it. That person never knew any of those things that I ever said. But here's what happened. Like, I was able to get it out. And there was a moment that came where it was done. I had said everything that I had needed and felt and wanted to say. I had let myself feel the range of emotions to the depth and the height and the breadth that I had felt them in the past and that I was feeling them right now. This was not something that was done in a matter of, like 30 seconds or a minute. Like, this was an afternoon of me processing through this, right? And at some point starting all over again from the top. You know how you remember things? Oh yeah, and another thing, let me tell you this about XYZ time. That was happening in the confined, confidential space of my own apartment, where nobody else could judge me and nobody else could see me and nobody else could say, well, you shouldn't feel that way and maybe you should have done this. There was none of that. It was just me being honest with what I was feeling in that moment at that time. And there came a time when all of the feelings had been felt and processed and gotten out. So that was the first time that ever happened. If that's ever related to you, drop me some fire emojis, some fire flame emojis, because that stuff burns when it's inside, right? Like that frustration, that anger, like it can lead to bitterness and resentment if it's not out, right? It's either going to come out because you are getting it out, or it's going to come out in other ways, like an explosion of temper, right? Or you're just going to lose your ever-loving mind on one little thing at the store or on a phone call with somebody else. And if it doesn't come out that way, as an explosion of something someplace else, at the wrong place, at the wrong time, where there's other people around who are just going to be receiving the brunt of that, which is really somebody else's stuff, right? Then it's going to come down and it's going to come out in your body in terms of illness or depression, other ways, because you stuff it down, you push it down, you're just suppressing it, right? As you suppress it, it gets depressed, and then that's how people get depressed. So getting it out that way, or letting it come out at the wrong place at the wrong time, or then carrying it with you, and we see a whole host of problems when we carry it with us all the time like that. So that's the first time that ever happened. So again, give me some fire flames if you can relate to that, or a heart because you're like, yes girl, I know, and I love the whole process, and you've realized that there's a process in getting that out. Or just, I don't really know if the sparkly glitter emoji applies right there, but it will in a minute. So then the second time that I was, again, aware of the process that was happening in my mind as I was getting through things, fast forward a couple more years, and again, so that relationship ended up ending because I was done over, sorry, I keep getting text messages. I was done and over it, saw what was going on, and that was done. A couple years later, different friend, different situation, we had kind of had a falling out, and I was like, and I had come to realize that I had said and done some things that I should not have, and that other person realized that as well, and we decided that we were going to get together and hang out. And there was a suggestion made as what we could do when we got together, and I didn't want to do that. And the other person got mad because their response was, well, you should just be happy that you're getting to spend time with me. It shouldn't really matter what we do. And that really frustrated me, and I ended up hanging up the phone, and I never talked to that person ever again. So again, these are probably in situations that anyways, I should have seen signs before, but this can apply to any situation. In that moment, I was very frustrated, and it was kind of like reliving the whole like last week and how things had kind of fallen apart, and thinking of things what I wish I would have said something then, or I wish I would have recognized and realized what was going on when it was happening. And I let myself have the moment. And I let myself have the feeling of whatever came up. And this time it was really more pain and hurt, because I wasn't being valued as much as I thought I was valuing the other person, and the other person wasn't really willing to respect that I had a boundary. I didn't want to do that thing. I wanted to do something else. I still wanted to spend time with that person, but I just didn't want to do the one thing. It wasn't the person, it was the thing. But the person reacted totally differently, and that was done. So in that moment, I let myself feel the pain. This one was all about pain. This one wasn't about anger, and it wasn't about frustration, and it wasn't about bitterness. It was just about being hurt and feeling the pain. And there were lots of tears involved with this one. There wasn't any words that came out in terms of like being raw and unfiltered and like letting it out. It was just feeling the pain and acknowledging the fact that I was hurt, and that I wasn't expecting that to happen, and I felt like I had just lost the relationship all over again. And again, I let myself feel that way and ask the questions, like, why isn't this important, and why isn't this okay, and why doesn't that person want to spend time with me even if we're doing something else, and is it really me, or did I say or do something? And your mind just goes through and analyzes, right? What did I do wrong? Is it something I said? Is it something I did? Why is there miscommunication here? Why is this happening? And just letting myself feel the pain, feel the hurt. And again, no shame, no condemnation, no judgment of feeling it and whether it was justified or valid. If I was feeling it, I let myself own it as a valid feeling. If I was feeling it, it was valid. But again, I was by myself. There was nobody else around. And I just let myself feel it to the depth and to the extent that I needed to. And I was a little farther along in my faith at this time, and there was a lot more prayer going on. And this happened after that first incident, where I realized on that first incident that regardless of how I was feeling and regardless of how things were coming out, I was still seen and I was still valid, and my emotions still mattered. And once I understood that I was still seen in that moment, I think it probably took off the need to feel like I had to be so extreme in how I was expressing it. I think sometimes we feel like the more extreme we are in expressing the emotion, the more the other person will understand and the more valid it will be. And I think I learned in that first moment that that's not always the case. Just feeling the emotion and just being there and allowing myself to feel it was valid enough. And I didn't need to go to such an extreme extent to let it come out. And so there was a moment when I was expressing this pain and expressing this hurt, crying, praying it out, all by myself, nobody else around. There came a moment where it was literally gone. One moment I'm crying and feeling pain, and the next moment literally completely fine, like it had been taken from me, like just completely gone. Just like it had in the first time, just it was done, there was nothing left. Mad one minute, not the next. In pain and crying one minute, feeling like hurt, and then the next, nothing. Feeling completely fine, and like I was okay. It had been processed. And so there haven't been too many other moments in my life, maybe one or two, because we've had an entire pandemic since then, and people felt a whole range of things that they never knew existed, right? There was a moment in there where something very similar happened. But again, the whole point is realizing that for me and for you as well, that there's a process of like taking myself through that. And it may not look the exact same for you, but there's going to be some similarities to it. And here's what they are. So giving yourself the permission to feel whatever it is that you're feeling without shame, without judging, without condemnation, without guilt, and without the shoulds and the shouldn'ts. Let's just take that out, right? Just take the shouldn'ts and just get rid of it, because that doesn't help. It just adds another layer of a barrier to getting down to the real emotion that you're just gonna have to come back to later on and dig through. So just get rid of that. If you're feeling the emotion, there's a reason why, and it's better to process it as soon as you can and not let it build up. And whether that means you are, as, like I said, as raw and unfiltered as you need to be to get it out, then do it in a place where nobody is there and you can just do it without that fear of being judged or shamed or condemned for feeling that way. Just take that off the table right now. Feel it to the depth and the breadth that you have experienced it either in the past or right then. And know that you may have to cycle through once or twice to get it out. So that is what I have for you today. Those emotional changes that can happen in a moment, and not necessarily going from like good to bad, but actually going from bad to good, or from, I don't want to say it bad. It's not bad to feel that way. So let's just rewind that. Okay. So feeling whatever it is, the more intense emotions, right? Like the anger, the frustration, the bitterness, like the things that we don't associate with being positive emotions, right? Feeling those and feeling them and letting yourself feel them and going from that to a state of being at peace and calm and, dare I say, joy? I mean, depending on how far it goes, but being able to walk away from that. It's done, it's processed, it's gone. Because we all can go from a better emotional state, it's like a lower emotional state, like that's easy, but going from that lower emotional state to a higher emotional state in an instant, I think we all want that, and I think we all want it, and it is possible as long as you allow yourself to go through the feelings of feeling it, being honest with yourself about your emotion, owning that emotion, so therefore it can be exchanged for a different emotion. And recognizing that there might be a little bit of a cycle to it, and that's okay. You just work through it again, and if there is more of a cycle to it, you'll probably find that the next time you go through it, it's not as intense, and that's okay. You're just working it all out, and you're getting it all out. Because remember, either you get it out, or it will come out someplace else. And an outburst at the wrong place at the wrong time with usually a recipient that should never have received it in the first place, right? Or in like some sort of implosion emotionally, physically, stress, depression, other things that go on in your body when you suppress those things. So that is our time together today. If any of this resonated with you, please feel free to share those with me if you so desire. I appreciate you, and I appreciate your time, and I look forward to seeing you again next week for Transformation Tuesday.